everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome back to my little embroidery studio that you see behind me. If you're new here, welcome, hello. I'm so glad that you have found us and I hope you enjoy your stitching journey with us. Today I wanted to show you a fabulous little technique from the world of Goldwork and it's called Elizabethan Twist. It's a little bit more unusual and not as commonly known as lots of the other techniques like cut work, couching, chipping, things like that. But in my opinion, I think that just makes it all the more fun and interesting to learn. If you love shiny threads and obviously exploring beautiful embroidery techniques, then you are 100% in the right place. I also teach a range of online courses in different embroidery techniques like Goldwork, obviously, Jacobean, white work, stump work. So if you're interested in learning more, please do check out the description box below where there's some links. Right, let's get into Elizabethan Twist. So we're going to look at now working our Elizabethan Twist. And you can see it's much finer than the twist that we used for our previous example, and we're going to stitch this down in pairs, and this is used to fill wider shapes. So for this we're going to use a single strand of stranded cotton in colour 326, and you can see I've started off the thread there. I'm just going to bring that up to the front, and I've run it very lightly through the wax as well, not too much because I don't want to lose its nice shine to the thread. And we can start on either side, it doesn't matter, but I'm starting just below our little V shape there at the middle, and we're going to stitch down our pieces of twist. Now at the sides we'll be stitching them down individually, and in the middle on our design lines, so this central line and this little V shape, we'll be stitching them down together. It doesn't matter which side you start off on, so whatever is easiest to you. And it's a bit fiddly again to begin with. Length of thread, Elizabethan Twist that we've got, you want around about 30-40 centimetres. You don't need to have enough to complete the whole of the half of the shape. You can start and finish off a new Elizabethan Twist in the middle of the shape, so that's fine. But 30 centimetres should be more than enough to get you to the bottom, and then again 30-40 centimetres will be more than enough to work the top. So I'm just going to take one piece of twist for the moment, and I've got a tail end of around about 3 to 4 centimetres, and that is going to be plunged and taken through to the back and tied back as you would do a normal passing, say. And we're going to bring the needle up just below our first piece of Elizabethan Twist. We're going to take the needle down and we're going to try and create the smallest stitch we possibly can. Can you see there? I'm literally just going over one thread of the fabric, trying to get it as small as I possibly can. Then I'm going to come up just below, again on the same side on the design line, a fraction below. Again, as close as we can possibly get. And then I'm going to take my second piece of twist. And then when I take my needle down this time, I'm going to tuck it in to our previous stitch so we get them nice and close together with as little gap between them as possible. There, like that. So at the sides, they're going to be stitched down individually. And then in the middle, we're going to stitch them down together. Now we want our Elizabethan Twist running at 90 degrees to our shape, so it's going to go straight across there like that. Now, because we've got 2 stitches at the ends, and we're going to have 1 stitch in the middle sections, you will find that your middle stitch might need to be a fraction bigger, because 2 stitches ends up being a little bit thicker than just the 1 stitch. So I'm going to bring my needle up at the bottom, there like that, and then just take it down straight down on the other side. So I'm trying to emulate the width of stitch that I have there and keeping it the same as the width of the 2 stitches together there. Then we're going to take the top thread, bring the needle up in between the threads, Take the top one, bring our needle up and then down over. Again, trying to keep the smallest stitch we possibly can. And then bring the needle up underneath the second one, the bottom one, so underneath both. And you could move this out of the way if it helps you see a little bit clearer. There, like that, so you can see the smallest gap possible. And then again, take the needle down, tucking it in close, using that same hole as the previous stitch. And you can see the needle angling in, there, like that. So that's our first little row. Then to work our next row, we're going to come up again, just below the stitch we did. Again, as close as we can, but not using the same hole. Then we're going to take the bottom piece of Elizabethan Twist, so that's the top one. I'm going to move that out of the way. And I'm going to fold it back on itself, like that. But I'm going to keep a loop there. Then take my needle down, tucking and angling it underneath, sharing the same hole if I can. And then, before I pull my thread all the way tight, I just want to pull my Elizabethan Twist so that I create a little loop like that. And I want that loop to be pretty small. Then bring the needle up just below what we've just done, leaving a small gap. Then we take our top piece of thread, loop that around there like that, angle the needle in towards, share the same hole if we can. And then again, before I pull my stitching thread too tight, I'm just going to pull on my Elizabethan Twist to create my loop like that. And that loop should sit just outside the one I've just done. So you can see the gold actually extends out of the design line. That's fine, it's supposed to. And you get like a little kind of frilly edge when you have finished, a little scalloped edge. So then we'll come and do our middle section, laying it down straight. Don't forget this one, the stitch in the middle, because we've got 2 stitches at the end there. This usually ends up a little bit wider. Can you see the gap there to accommodate the 2? And we can still angle it in, use the same hole. I'm not angling it in quite as much. There, like that. And we come and do the other side. So before we can turn, we need to stitch these both down. So I've separated them out. This is my bottom one. This is my top one. I'm going to come up nice and close to that previous one, not in the same hole. Lay the Elizabethan Twist over the top of my needle. Angle the needle underneath, tuck it in nice and close. Same with this lower piece. And then we can turn. Again, nice and close. And we're going to take the bottom one, which is this one. Let's just move the top one out of the way. We're going to fold it back on itself. Take our needle down. And before we pull that stitch tight, we're just going to pull a little loop through. Now I want this to lie flat, and it's actually twisted back up on itself. So I'm just going to twist it round there so it lies flat. And get that loop nice and small like that. And then I can tension my stitching thread over the top. Do the top one in the same way. Loop that round. Angle our needle. And tension our little loop, and then tension our thread. Now we're aiming to try and keep these rows as straight as we can. You don't want it to sort of start, you end up with bigger stitches on one side and smaller stitches on the other, so it ends up going like that. We want to try and keep them as even and straight as we possibly can. Now, it's easier said than done. This is not an easy technique. So a single stitch in the middle. And you may find with this technique that you can see little gaps in between your rows. And that's actually normal. You should get a good coverage, but it's not going to fully cover like our passing does. Okay, you can see here. If this was a dark colour underneath, you'd see it much clearer, but we've got a little gap here. And that is the nature of it. Obviously, we don't want our gaps to be super big. You do want small gaps, but you will have gaps. So I'll just show you one more side. And also as well, we want to try and keep these stitches nice and straight and in line with one another. So I'm going to pause there. You'll obviously continue down to the bottom in the same way, and you'll be left with two little ends like we have here, and they can be plunged and tied back when you have finished. Now I'm going to work the top half of the design, and you can see I've just taped these ends out of the way so they don't get caught up in my stitching. And something else I should mention, all starting and finishing stitches, they should be done on a design line so that you cover them up, not in the middle of an open space here like that, because you run the risk of being able to see them. So all starting and finishing stitches actually on either the outside design lines or on the internal lines so that they get covered. I started off on the left hand side with this one so that I haven't got lots of starting and finishing off on that side. I'm actually going to start off on the other side, and we'll start off by working it in the same way. So bring the needle up as close as we can to our previous stitch. We'll take one bit of twist. This time obviously angling the needle down towards the previous stitches. And it's looped around. Take that through there like that. It double looped itself around, so we don't want that. And then we stitch the second one in. So again, working with two individual pieces. Just making sure that loop hadn't twisted around on itself. So instead of just doing the central line, we've got these side lines coming out as well that we need to work on. So before I get to the central line, you can see here I've got my side line, so I'm going to come up here, follow the design line and take a stitch down into the middle. Again, I'll angle that and tuck it in nice and close. Then obviously we've still got our stitch in the middle, so we need to put that in. And then we're going to have another stitch on the other side. So any internal lines are stitched over together, but then when we come back out to the sides, we're going to stitch them down individually. And basically, we're just going to follow those inside lines to create a little decoration, a little pattern. And that pattern doesn't have to be as simple as this. You could do something quite complex if you wanted to, and really get creative and decorative with it. Bit of a fiddly technique, but actually, once you get going, it's very pretty and it's not impossibly difficult to do. So I'll take my top one. We were taking the bottom one before. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to add a little bit of tape there to hold those down as well. So take the top one, fold that over, take our stitch over the top of it, hold it in place there so it doesn't twist up over itself, and then before I fully tighten, pull that through so I get a nice small little loop, the smallest I possibly can. And again, come up a little bit further away, take our bottom piece, loops twisted up, so we'll just untwist that. Then we can come in and do our next lot of diagonal lines. And so I get a nice continuous line. I'm trying to still use the same holes of those previous stitches. Again, we want to make sure that these don't get twisted up, that they're lying nice and flat. Come up between the two, we'll stitch over the bottom one first, the one closest to the other pieces of gold. Then we stitch the top one down. And then we turn back. Top one first, then the bottom one. And I find it easier to tension the thread and then pull my loop tight. Not everyone does it like that, they'll pull the loop first. But I find it much easier to do it like this because I'm able to get more consistent loops at the sides and they're neater. So obviously you will continue working up to the point in this same way.